The screens pierced through the winter air of Salem Village that February morning in 1692. Betty Paris squirmed on the floor of her father's house, her body twisting in impossible ways. Her cousin Abigail Williams clawed at invisible attackers while speaking in tongues no one could understand. The village doctor examined the girls but found nothing wrong. No fever, no physical wounds, nothing that medicine could cure. "The evil hand is upon them," a Puritan declared, and with those 6 words, he lit the fuse that would explode into one of America's darkest chapters. Greetings! I am Dr. Veritas, and today we uncover the dark truth behind the Salem Witch Trials. Salem Village sat in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, a Puritan settlement carved from the wilderness, about 20 miles north of Boston. Life here was harsh, cold, and ruled by strict religious laws. These weren't the Pilgrims from Plymouth Rock. These were the Puritans, religious hardliners who believed the devil lurked around every corner, waiting to snatch souls and corrupt the godly. At the time, King William III ruled England, and Massachusetts operated under a royal charter with William Phips as governor. But in tiny Salem Village, the real power lay with the church elders and their iron grip on daily life. What started with 2 sick girls would spiral into a nightmare lasting over a year, from February 1692 to May 1693. Neighbors turned on neighbors, families split apart, and the very foundations of this religious community crumbled under the weight of fear, accusations, and something far more dangerous than any witch: human nature itself. Picture this: black-robed priests dragging accused witches to massive bonfires, while hundreds of victims scream as flames consume them. Church leaders personally lighting matches, their faces twisted with religious fury, as entire families burn alive. Thousands dead, bodies piled high, an entire population terrorized into submission by bloodthirsty religious fanatics. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, that's not exactly true. The biggest myth about Salem is that the church directly killed people. In reality, the Puritan ministers were actually some of the most cautious voices during the whole mess. Many church leaders, including the famous Cotton Mather, warned against relying on spectral evidence, basically testimony claiming someone's ghost or spirit was seen committing evil acts. The killings were carried out by civil courts, not religious tribunals. Then there's the burning myth that just won't die. Ask anyone about Salem, and they'll tell you about witches burning at the stake. Hollywood loves this image: the dramatic flames, the screaming victims, the theatrical horror of it all. But here's the shocking truth: not a single person was burned in Salem. Not one. The British legal system used hanging for witchcraft, and the Massachusetts colonists followed British law. The numbers myth might be the worst of all. People casually throw around figures like hundreds or even thousands of victims. Some claim entire villages were wiped out, that Salem was basically a genocide against women. These wild numbers get repeated so often that they become accepted truth. Teachers tell students, documentaries present them as fact, and the legend grows bigger with each retelling. But the reality is far different from the legend. When you actually dig into the historical records, when you count the real bodies and read the actual court documents, a very different picture emerges. The truth is troubling enough without the Hollywood embellishments. And understanding what really happened, the actual causes, the real motivations, the precise death toll, tells us far more about human nature than any exaggerated horror story ever could. To truly understand Salem, you must first understand the Puritans. The devil wasn't some abstract concept or metaphor. He was as real as your neighbor, and probably more dangerous. Imagine living in a world where every shadow could hide a demon, where bad luck meant God was angry with you, and where your salvation hung by a thread that Satan constantly tried to cut. These trials and the evidence associated with them was all based around the idea of good, which was connected to God, versus evil, where the connection lied with the devil. For the Puritans, witchcraft wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. The Bible said witches existed, so they must exist. When strange things happened, supernatural explanations made perfect sense. Salem Village was a powder keg of personal grudges waiting to explode. Sarah Good was the village beggar, going door to door asking for food and work. When people refused her, she'd mutter under her breath as she walked away. Later, when someone's cow died or their bread wouldn't rise, they remembered Sarah's angry mumbling. Must have been a curse, they thought. The Putnam family had been feuding with other families for years over land boundaries, church politics, and business deals gone wrong. When young Ann Putnam started having fits and began naming names, guess whose enemies she accused? The pattern repeated throughout the village. Old grudges, property disputes, and social tensions all bubbled up through the accusations. Behind many accusations lay cold, hard economics. Martha Corey's husband, Giles, owned valuable land that others coveted. When Martha was accused, Giles initially defended her, until he too was accused. Under English law, if you were executed for witchcraft, your property was forfeited to the crown. Suddenly, valuable farmland became available for the right price, and neighbors who had always wanted that prime real estate found themselves with an opportunity. Salem Village sat on the edge of wilderness, with hostile Native American tribes just beyond the tree line. Recent wars had left everyone on edge. King Philip's War had devastated New England just 16 years earlier, and violent raids still occurred regularly. French and Indian forces attacked settlements, kidnapped colonists, and burned entire villages. When you're already expecting attack from outside, it's easy to believe enemies are working from within too. Here's where things get truly bizarre. If somebody says in court, "I saw John Proctor and he was flying through the sky and he flew to so-and-so's window at night," this would be entered into the courtroom as spectral evidence that John Proctor is in league with the devil and is a witch, Brown says. It was accepted in the courts during the Salem Witch Trials. The evidence was accepted on the basis that the devil and his minions were powerful enough to send their spirits, or specters, to pure religious people in order to lead them astray. Imagine being on trial because someone claimed they saw your ghost flying around at night. No physical evidence needed, no witnesses to real actions. Just someone's dream or vision was enough to get you hanged. The accusers would writhe and scream in court, claiming the accused person's specter was attacking them right there in the courtroom. Judges took these performances as legal evidence. The panic spread like wildfire beyond Salem Village. Neighboring towns started their own witch hunts. People packed up and fled the area entirely, abandoning homes and businesses. Trade ground to a halt as everyone suspected everyone else. The Massachusetts economy staggered under the weight of mass hysteria. The court later ruled that spectral evidence was inadmissible, which caused a dramatic reduction in their rate of convictions and may have hastened the end of the trials. By late 1692, influential leaders began speaking out against the madness. When the governor's own wife was accused, he quickly dissolved the special witch court. While fulfilling his role as judge, Samuel Sewall took part in proceedings that condemned innocent people to their deaths. In the aftermath of the trials, Sewall's troubled conscience led to a change of heart, and in January 1697, he made a public confession of guilt, remorse, and repentance for the role he had played. Over the following decades, the Massachusetts government slowly began making amends. They reversed the convictions, paid compensation to victims' families, and officially apologized. But the damage to the community's soul lasted much longer. Now, for the truth that Hollywood doesn't want to tell you because it's somehow both less dramatic and more horrifying than the legends. The trials resulted in the executions of 20 people, most of whom were women. By the end of the Salem Witch Trials, 19 people had been hanged, and 5 others had died in custody. Additionally, a man was pressed beneath heavy stones until he died. That's it. 20 executions total, not hundreds or thousands. All 19 of the executed victims died by hanging, the standard British method for witchcraft. The last execution took place on September 22nd, when Martha Corey, Mary Easty, Alice Parker, Mary Parker, Ann Pudeator, Wilmot Redd, Margaret Scott, and Samuel Wardwell were hanged. The 20th victim was Martha's husband, Giles Corey, who was crushed to death with heavy stones after refusing to enter a plea. Sarah Osborne, Roger Toothaker, Lydia Dustin, and Foster may have died in prison. Sources conflict as to the exact number of prison deaths. They died in the horrible conditions of colonial jails while awaiting trial. The church didn't run the trials. Civil courts did. The Court of Oyer and Terminer was a special government tribunal, not a religious body. Many ministers actually opposed the proceedings and questioned the evidence being used. This was indeed a dark moment in human history, but it wasn't genocide. It wasn't systematic religious persecution. It was a perfect storm of fear, superstition, personal grudges, economic pressures, and legal procedures gone horribly wrong. 20 people died with execution, and 5 in prison, because their neighbors let panic override reason. because authority figures failed to protect the innocent, and because a community forgot that accusations aren't the same as truth. So there you have it, the real Salem story, stripped of centuries of myth and Hollywood drama. No burning witches, no church-sponsored massacre, no thousands of victims. Just 25 people who died because fear can make ordinary neighbors into killers. And because once accusations start flying, they're almost impossible to stop. Although the number of deaths was far fewer than the myths suggest, that does not mean a great tragedy did not occur. Because it could happen again, anywhere, anytime people decide that rumors are facts, that superstition is wisdom, and that being different is the same as being dangerous. Salem wasn't about witches or devils. It was about humans and how easily ordinary people can be crushed when those in power choose to dominate simply because they can. That's the real horror story worth remembering. If you enjoyed this video, you might also like these two.